Alex Sterling, the Empire's youngest general, the dream guy of every girl on Earth. And me? I was a defective Omega who served as his assistant for 3 years. He wouldn't look my way even if he went through 8 wives, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. I spent 30 credits to buy a bionic android that looked exactly like Alex Sterling. He ate with me, held me while we watched movies, and we kissed in the sunset. Then, my android went missing, and the real Alex Sterling came back from his honeymoon. I handed him my resignation letter with a poker face. Instead of taking it, he pinned me against the desk. "Julian, why'd you stop calling me hubby?" The Empire's youngest general, Alex Sterling, is engaged to the youngest daughter of the Vance family. As soon as the news broke, 1,000,000 female hearts shattered, and 1,000,000 guys breathed a sigh of relief. I went about arranging the wedding details as if nothing had happened. From the tablecloths at the banquet to the wedding rings, I personally oversaw everything. No one knew this wedding better than I did. Not even Alex himself. I was an Omega with defective glands. I couldn't smell pheromones, making me functionally no different from a beta. Sometimes I was actually grateful for the defect. At least it allowed me to stay by Alex's side as a beta assistant. Managing the wedding logistics wasn't easy. I hadn't slept more than 7 hours in the last 3 days combined. Staring at the bright red ceremonial suit, I zoned out for a split second before a stinging pain slapped across my face. An exquisite teacup lay shattered at my feet. "The tea is scalding. Are you trying to sabotage me?" Miss Vance's accusing voice rang out. This was already the 3rd time she'd found a reason to lash out. I really wanted to tell her that for a salary of 3,500 credits, she wasn't worth the blood pressure spike. "I'm sorry, Miss Vance. It was my negligence. It won't happen again." With a swollen, red face, I knelt on the floor, picking up the porcelain shards one by one. Seeing me in such a pathetic state, Miss Vance finally cracked a slight smile. She ordered me to call Alex. Trying on wedding suits without the groom? That's ridiculous. After cleaning up the shards, I dialed Alex. His cold voice came through the receiver. Understood. He came even though he had a critical military council meeting. I stood off to the side like part of the scenery, watching them choose outfits. The domineering Miss Vance turned shy and demure in front of Alex's imposing figure. Given their equally striking looks, I had to admit they were a good match. While Miss Vance was changing, Alex looked at my swollen face. What happened? I hid my cut hand behind my back. Accidentally got scalded while drinking tea. "Humph, you've been working hard lately." It was just polite small talk, but I smiled anyway. The pain on my face felt even sharper. It's part of the job. Not hard at all. As Alex was about to walk past me, I couldn't help but grab his arm. Looking into those deep eyes, I said calmly, "She doesn't love you." Alex raised an eyebrow. "How do you know?" The words I wanted to say stuck in my throat. "Just a joke, General." Alex didn't say anything else. His gaze followed Miss Vance as she walked out in full grandeur. After settling everything, I quietly excused myself from the scene. The wedding day arrived quickly. I placed my written resignation letter underneath the invitation stack. "Julian, there's an issue with the wine over here." A young assistant called out to me in a panic. His green, inexperienced look reminded me of myself when I first started. I folded the resignation letter, tucked it into my suit pocket, and calmly went to handle the emergency. It was a minor issue. A nervous waitress had knocked over a table full of champagne. Her face was full of terror. She knew that selling herself wouldn't garner enough money to pay for this vintage. "Clean it up and bring out the backup glasses." I bent down and helped the girl, who was soaked in alcohol, to her feet. Her fearful, timid eyes reminded me of my old self. I should have learned to say it's okay like that person used to, nodding slightly at the girl's expression of overwhelming gratitude. Go to HR and resign. A girl this innocent and timid wasn't cut out for a cesspool like this. The bystanders looked like they wanted to speak but stopped. Like master, like dog. Truly cold-blooded. I cast an apologetic smile toward Alex in the distance. The ceremony started. Even though I had watched the wedding planners rehearse it hundreds of times, I didn't have the courage to watch the real thing. At the climax of the wedding march, I walked out of the lively venue. The noise of the celebration faded behind me. When I walked into the office building, covered in the chill of the wind, I guess they were probably exchanging rings right about now. I placed the crumpled resignation letter, along with my well wishes, on Alex's desk and quietly backed out. Back at my own cubicle, I picked up the photo frame hidden in my drawer. Goodbye. I closed the office door, leaving my keys inside. I locked away the love from my youth that I could never speak of. I took only that lightweight photo and walked straight into the cold, dark night. Julian, your heat cycle is approaching. Because of your chaotic pheromone levels, if you don't find an alpha, this heat will be very difficult to survive. The doctor sent by the Omega Association looked at me grimly with the medical report. My father stood by, looking worried. Father said, Uncle Zhang's son is an alpha. He's a good kid. You should meet him when you have time. The doctor added, the association has excellent volunteer alphas who can provide assistance at any time. I smiled and thanked them. I need to go on a business trip to Nova Prime recently. We can talk about it when I get back. An Omega without a sense of smell doesn't affect others during heat. It just makes the Omega uncomfortable. It wasn't a big deal. Ignoring my father's disapproving look, I boarded the transport to Nova Prime. Nova Prime was famous for its bionic android technology. As the most popular general, there were naturally many unauthorized Alex Sterling bots on the market. But I didn't expect there to be this many. Some wore uniforms, some wore suits, and some wore absolutely nothing. Under the gaze of so many Alex, a faint blush rose on my face. I didn't have any grand ideas. I just wanted an Alex to keep me company, even if he was fake. The shop owner, looking like he knew exactly what I needed, pulled me over. This is the latest R&D model. Touch these pecs. Look at the size. The owner forced my hand onto the scorching hot chest muscles. I looked up and met Alex's deeply affectionate, smiling eyes. My heart raced, and I retracted my hand like I'd been electrocuted. That's not what I meant. The owner probably thought I was just window shopping. Don't touch if you aren't buying. He shooed me out of the shop with a look of disgust. I walked on, dejected, until a guy in a hoodie blocked my path. He said he was selling an Alex Sterling bot at a low price. I guarantee it's no worse than the ones in the shops. Mine just has a little damage. I'll sell it to you for 100 credits. Seeing my hesitation, he panicked. 30? Can we do 30? You can't lose at that price. I felt like if I hesitated any longer, he might just give it to me for free. Fine, but you have to guarantee it's real. Post-sale service for androids was important. Usually, maintenance cost far more than the purchase price. The hustler looked offended. Put your heart at ease. Where would I even get a fake? He muttered something under his breath like, do fakes cost nothing to make? But I didn't hear him clearly. At the time, I really didn't understand the depth of those words. After navigating a few remote alleyways, I finally arrived at the hustler's place. He turned back and warned me cautiously, be careful. The robot is a bit emotionally unstable. Could a robot bite me or something? The owner opened the dilapidated door. Inside, in a cage in the middle of the room, a struggling Alex was tied up roughly. I shouldn't say Alex. I should say the bionic robot. His eyes were bloodshot. His naked upper body was covered in wounds, and his mouth was gagged with a rag, preventing him from speaking. Seeing an Alex like this, my heart actually ached, even knowing he was fake. How can you lock him up like this? I exclaimed in dissatisfaction. The owner looked helpless. He keeps trying to hit me. I didn't have a choice. Strangely, the Alex in the cage quieted down miraculously after seeing my face clearly. Shock flashed through his eyes. The owner cautiously grabbed me as I moved to untie the ropes. If he hurts you, I'm not responsible. I nodded calmly, handed the owner 30 credits, took the key, and went to unlock the cage. Alex was very quiet. I guessed he had exhausted himself from struggling earlier. I gently untied the hemp ropes that were digging into his flesh. This was the first time I had been this close to Alex's body. Besides the fresh injuries, this robot's muscular body had layers of old scars. This robot was made with insane precision. They had even replicated the scars from Alex's military service. I took off my coat and draped it over him. The owner looked at me like I was a freak. Buddy, robots don't get cold. Well, caring for Alex was just an instinct ingrained in my bones. The robot's body was heavy. Leaning against me, he made my walk a bit staggering. Just throw him on the cart. the owner said, pointing to a filthy, freezing pushcart in the back. I shook my head, my voice soft. He wouldn't like that. The owner probably thought I was insane. As soon as he ushered me, his weird customer, out, he slammed the door shut. It was snowing outside. Wearing only a thin shirt, my lips turned purple from the cold. Don't worry, I'm taking you home. I didn't expect the robot on my back to speak. His voice was low and husky, but very pleasant. Do you like me that much? My movements paused for a second, but I figured it must be the robot's programming. My voice remained calm. Yeah. I like you. I've liked you for many years. I had zero psychological burden confessing to a robot. I dragged him through the wind and snow step by difficult step. On the way back, Alex was very quiet. With my head down trudging forward, I naturally couldn't see the dark intensity in his eyes. We got back to my small rental room. I frantically wrapped Alex in a warm quilt, wiped his face, and bandaged him up. I brought over hot water and food. Wait, robots don't need to eat. The snowflakes that had fallen on me melted, and my body wouldn't stop shivering. I had actually gone crazy enough to buy a robot identical to Alex. I felt pathetic. Suddenly, I felt warmth on my face. Alex was calmly wiping away my tears. Like a man dying of thirst in the desert, I buried myself into that warm embrace. I held Alex's hand, hugged him, and rested my head on his chest. I was greedy for this hug, even if it was fake. This wasn't someone else's Alex. This was my Alex. I wouldn't care that he was damaged. I would fix him up until he was beautiful again. I looked up with misty eyes. Hubby, I'm so cold. Will you hold me? I felt the Alex beside me stiffen. After a long silence, he hugged me tightly. My heart soared. I nibbled on his ear and whispered softly, like coaxing a child. Hubby, you're the best. I never imagined I'd be acting spoiled toward a robot. My colleagues always said my face was like a poker card, unapproachable. If they heard me sounding like this, their jaws would probably hit the floor. It's dark. Let's sleep. I poked my head out of the warm embrace and stated the fact calmly, as if the person crying weakly just seconds ago wasn't me. Alex stared blankly at the only bed in the room. Do robots these days judge their owners for being poor? The bed is comfortable. Or do you not need to sleep? I realized Alex's programming probably didn't include sleep mode. I wrapped him up like a burrito and helped him lie down on the soft bed. Hubby, just do it to keep me company. I casually took off my clothes, revealing a lean waist and pale thighs. Just as I was about to remove the last piece of fabric, Alex suddenly grabbed my wrist in a death grip. His grip was strong. I looked at him in pain, only to realize his expression was one of extreme restraint, cold sweat rolling down his face. Was he malfunctioning? I reached out to touch his forehead. It was shockingly hot. What do you do when a robot gets sick? Charge it? While I was confused, Alex pulled the thick quilt over me. It was the second thing he had said to me. Sleep early. Good night. My robot was a bit different from others. He ate, drank, slept, and didn't need charging. I couldn't help but marvel at how fast technology was advancing. Even as an assistant who had been by Alex's side for nearly a decade, I couldn't tell the difference between this robot and the real thing. I named the robot Ash. Most of the money I had saved over the years was spent on him. Ash, you look so handsome in this outfit. Ash, this is your favorite fish. Ash, I know you like this vintage. I would gentlemanly ask Alex to wait for me while I went to the counter to pay. Sir, this card has insufficient funds. I calmly handed over another card. Try this one. I dressed my Ash to look noble and handsome, charming so many young girls that they couldn't even walk straight. Under my meticulous care, Ash's wounds healed into fresh pink skin. When he stepped on the scale, he had even gained a few pounds. Do robots gain weight? I suspected I remembered the numbers wrong. Ash still didn't talk much, but I could feel him softening. Now, without me asking, he would hold me while we slept and kiss me in the morning. I figured his glitchy programming had corrected itself. I was so obsessed with this warmth that my suppressants stopped working. Cold sweat rolled down my face, and my whole body ached like it was falling apart. What's wrong? I bit my lip until it bled. Hubby, just hold me and I'll be fine. The panic on Ash's face didn't look like something a robot should have. He stubbornly tried to take me to the hospital. I hugged his neck weakly. Idiot, it's just my heat. I just need to ride it out. Aren't you a beta? Alex's voice was full of disbelief. My consciousness was already lost in the pain, so I naturally didn't hear Ash clearly. What happened next felt very natural. Alex kissed my face tenderly and gently undressed me. He took the lead. No matter how much I begged for mercy, he wouldn't stop. A very faint scent of wild sage filled the room. So this is your pheromone scent. I like it. Having completely lost consciousness, I naturally didn't hear that sentence. I woke up rubbing my aching body only to see the culprit standing nearby holding a bowl of millet porridge. My voice is hoarse from crying. Why didn't you stop? Ash hung his head at my scolding. Seeing him look so submissive, I couldn't bear to blame him anymore. He's a machine. He probably doesn't understand human speech. I can't blame him for that. Hubby, can you not understand what I say? Alex looked stunned for a moment. I made an X with my arms at him. When I do this, you stop, okay? His burning gaze lingered on my swollen lips. I didn't know if he understood or not. Later, I was pinned down again. Even though I signaled X until my arms cramped, he didn't stop. My heat cycle lasted 3 days. Fortunately, since he was a robot, I didn't feel ashamed calling him hubby over and over again without any psychological pressure. Rubbing my sore waist, I looked at Alex seriously. We can't do this every day. I have to go out and work to support you, understand? I saw Alex looking like he wanted to say something but stopped. I annoyed slapped my own forehead. Why am I telling you this? You can't understand anyway. I rarely saw a robot look so silent. My communicator never received a termination notice. The real Alex Sterling must be too busy with his honeymoon to deal with such trivial matters. Luckily, my skills were solid. It wasn't hard to find a new accounting job on Nova Prime. When I went out to work, I specifically put on the movie Wall-E for Ash to watch. The TV was full of his kind. He shouldn't feel bored, right? Alex didn't say if it was good or bad. He just looked at me with helpless silence. When I got back that night, I got railed hard. There weren't many positions left that Alex hadn't tried on me. Life was plain but happy. It was a life I hadn't even dared to dream of, until a message from the Capitol broke my illusion of peace. Alex gently tapped my fist. Doesn't that hurt? Only then did I realize my nails were digging into my flesh, drawing bright red blood. I habitually hid my hand behind my back. Doesn't hurt. Hubby, I'll go make you something good to eat. A smile reappeared on my face. I patted Ash's big, fuzzy head reassuringly. I could feel Alex's burning gaze on my back, but I didn't notice the deep heartache in his eyes. Julian. I received your resignation and well wishes. What a waste of Alex's years of training you. Come back and hand over your work. Tiffany Vance. Thinking about the content of the email, I burned the eggs. Hot oil splattered from the pan, raising blisters on my hand. But I felt no pain at all. I calmly turned on the tap and ran my hand under cold water. Alex must hate me to the core to even relay messages through Miss Vance. The biting cold water was turned off, and I was pulled into a warm embrace. The robot applied ointment to my hand with heartache. His eyes paused when he touched the old, healed scars on my hand. His tone turned icy. Who hurt you? Looking at those identical brows and eyes, my heart swelled painfully. No one. Did it myself. I forced a pale smile. I bought tickets back to the Capitol, but settling Ash was a bit of a problem. Robots should have a one-click shutdown, right? But I searched everywhere on Ash's body and couldn't find it. Then I met Ash's dangerous gaze. Julian, do you want it again? He didn't give me a chance to refuse, kissing my lips fiercely. Later, I couldn't even form a complete sentence. With no other choice, I got Ash a fake ID and brought him back to the Capitol with me. Can I not wear this wig? No. I refused coldly. I was very satisfied with Ash's current look, blonde hair and green eyes. Alex's face was indeed stunning, whether styled masculine or feminine. Back at my home in the Capitol, I looked in the mirror and put on my three-piece suit. When zipping up the trousers, it felt a bit tight. I assumed it was just weight gain from irregular eating. The young man in the mirror looked cold and calm. This was the final dignity I would maintain seeing Alex. I turned around and met Ash's dark eyes. Your waist is very thin. Like it? I looked at him with amusement. Be a good boy and wait for me at home. When I get back, I'll wear it for you tonight. I gently kissed the corner of Ash's mouth and stepped onto the road to the office tower. Morning, Julian. How was your vacation? Colleagues greeted me enthusiastically. So, Alex told everyone I was on vacation? I couldn't figure it out, so I responded politely. After taking a few deep breaths, I knocked on Alex's office door. Come in. The voice was a bit high-pitched. It wasn't Alex inside. It was Tiffany Vance. I calmly watched her toying with Alex's official seal. Alex must really love her to let her mess around with official business like this. What? Not happy to see me? No. I handed over the files in my hand. These are the General's daily schedules, and these are the documents the General has signed. The email regarding the handover was very clear, and the files were neatly arranged where they should be. You know that's not what I'm talking about. Miss Vance impatiently threw the files at me. This time I tilted my head to dodge. If my face got injured, Ash would be distressed again. I don't know what you're talking about. The work handover is complete. Miss Vance, I'll be leaving now. Her question was strange, but it had nothing to do with me. The commotion in the office was loud, and quite a few people were craning their necks to watch. I walked out of the office with that same indifferent expression. Did Assistant Julian ever think this day would come when he fired that girl last time? Pathetic as a dog. The General said he didn't want him, so he tossed him. Whispers everywhere. It seemed my strict work attitude over the years had left quite an oppressive impression on them. I walked out of the office building, unbothered. I wanted to be dignified, but it ended up being ugly. I mentally cursed that love-struck fool Alex Sterling. Far away at home, a robot couldn't help but sneeze. Was someone cursing him? Why wasn't Julian back yet? Turning into an alley, I realized someone was following me. The footsteps were dense, likely a group operation. Before I could speculate further, my retreat was blocked by several burly men in black suits. After they respectfully stepped aside, I was met with Tiffany Vance's disgusted glare. Julian, you really are cheap. Alex treats you like a dog, yet you're still so loyal. Alex doesn't want you anymore. He told me to take back the thing he gave you. I was kicked to my knees at Tiffany's feet by the men in black. I looked at Tiffany's twisted face. Ever since I stumbled upon the intimate scene between Tiffany and the second son of the Sterling family during her engagement, I hadn't suffered a shortage of threats. I told Alex she didn't love him, but he married her anyway. I don't know what thing you're talking about. I genuinely didn't know of anything Alex had given me. Predictably, I took several slaps to the face. Tiffany's sharp nails left bloody scratches on my cheek. Then came the dense rain of fists from the men in black. Instinctively, I curled up to protect my abdomen. After the sharp pain came numbness. When I opened my eyes again, I saw that tall figure. He kicked away my attackers and shielded me in his warm embrace. I knew this was my Ash. I wanted to hide my slapped-up face. The burly men looked at Ash's face in horror. They all dropped to their knees. General, Miss Vance ordered us to do this. A flash of shock crossed Tiffany's pretty face. But after seeing Ash's green eyes, her arrogance returned instantly. I knew Alex couldn't be here. Julian, you have some nerve keeping a counterfeit pet. I didn't understand Tiffany's certainty, but I didn't like her insulting my Ash. I'm going to hit your wife. You don't mind, do you? I couldn't help but vent my misplaced anger on the innocent robot. Again, I saw the robot's silent, helpless expression. I stood up and slapped Tiffany across the face. She looked completely incredulous. Even a dog bites when cornered. First, counting the past ones, you slapped me 10 times. I'm returning one. That's reasonable. Second, I don't like you calling my Ash names. Tiffany raised her hand to hit me back, but Ash caught it. Meeting those deep, dark eyes, a flash of fear crossed Tiffany's face. It's a fake. The real Alex is already long. Ash flung the stunned Tiffany aside like trash. He took my hand and asked softly, "Does your hand hurt?" The tears I had held back for so long finally fell. "Alex Sterling, you are such a bastard." Ash held me in his arms, looking a bit at a loss. I realized I was losing composure. This had nothing to do with Ash. "I'm sorry." After hearing my apology, regret filled Ash's eyes. But my attention wasn't on that. "It's just a fake. What are you standing there for?" Lying on the ground, Miss Vance had long lost her air of a noble lady. The surrounding thugs woke from their daze, staring viciously at Ash. Before the fight could start, the voice of Alex's adjutant rang out from outside the alley. "Stop right there." Tiffany looked at the smiling adjutant with some apprehension. "Miss Vance, Assistant Julian has followed the general for so many years. Teaching him a lesson like this isn't appropriate, is it?" Logically, she couldn't argue. After all, I was Alex's dog. My smile was a bit pale. Tiffany didn't say anything in the end and stormed off in a rage. Ash leaned close to my ear and whispered, "I don't like it when you smile like that." Being intimate with someone who looked exactly like my boss in front of my former colleague. My old face felt awkward. I pushed Ash's head away and maintained a polite smile. "Thank you for the rescue, adjutant." The adjutant looked at me with strange respect. I felt it was odd. There was only Ash behind me. "It's nothing. Take care of yourself, Julian." Ash stubbornly insisted on taking me to the hospital. I didn't like hospitals. My mother lost her breath in a hospital. I deliberately spun a circle around Ash. "Look, I'm fine. Just superficial wounds. I'll put some medicine on at home." Ash's brows relaxed slightly. He picked me up in a princess carry. "Don't move." My abdomen throbbed with dull pain, but not enough to stop me walking. Facing that tense, handsome face, I really couldn't argue. Back home, Ash applied the medicine with practiced movements, and I was tucked into a warm bed. He kissed my forehead tenderly. "Good night, Julian." My dreams were restless. I mumbled a lot of nonsense. "Alex, don't get married. Tiffany doesn't love you." But mostly I said, "Alex, don't leave me behind." Ash held me, his eyes full of heartache. He patted my trembling back over and over. "Baby, I'm here." Surrounded by that comforting scent, I finally fell into a peaceful sleep. I opened my eyes to a brand new day. Ash was busy in the kitchen making lunch. He wore a cheap apron like it was haute couture. Broad shoulders, narrow waist. Very pleasing to the eye. Looking at his back, the confusion in my eyes quickly vanished. Alex couldn't cook. Only my Ash could. The thing Tiffany mentioned gave me an uneasy feeling. It was also strange that Alex hadn't shown his face after being back for so long. "Ash, I'm going out for a bit. Be good and stay home." After eating the last spoonful of rice Ash fed me, I gave my instructions. Ash's look wasn't friendly. "I'm going with you." He domineeringly pulled me into his arms and kissed me. What could I say? Okay, stop." I helplessly held Ash's hand as we walked toward Alex's residence. I had to see what the hell Tiffany was up to. I was good at jumping walls, and I knew the big tree in Alex's backyard very well. The tree was huge, with overlapping branches extending right to the bedroom window. Ash looked at me strangely. "Baby, do you do this often?" The branches were thick enough to easily hide Ash and me. "Not often. At most 3 times a month. We're playing statues. Whoever talks or moves first loses." I wasn't sure about a robot's intelligence, so I could only try to coax him. Ash's silence was deafening. Quiet was good. I focused entirely on checking the situation in Alex's bedroom. No one was inside. It wasn't until nightfall that I heard hurried footsteps. The door was thrown open by an anxious Tiffany, followed by Adrian Sterling sliding inside. They entangled on the bed. Tiffany was loud. I spoke honestly to Ash beside me. "Hubby, looks like you're wearing horns." Cuckolded. Ash raised an eyebrow. "Baby, you lost." "Baby, she doesn't sound as good as you." Are robots allowed to be this shameless? I chanted business matters first internally and watched a live peep show with a serious face. The two finally started talking business after their intimacy. "Found the item yet?" "It's not on Julian." He didn't seem to be lying. My brother trusted that dog the most. "How is it possible? 3 months is almost up. Let's relax." I listened with a head full of question marks. They stopped talking. They started again. I covered Ash's eyes with my hand. "Don't learn bad things." His eyelashes tickled my palm. Judging by their stamina, they wouldn't be talking business again soon. I quietly pulled Ash away. 3 months? What were they waiting for? Proof that Ash did learn bad things. "Baby, you weren't focused just now." I got bitten by Ash. Couldn't bear to hit him. Couldn't bear to scold him. I let him have his way. Military council meeting to be held today at 9 o'clock at the administration building. Watching the news on TV, I was startled awake. Locked Ash in the room and rushed to the adjutant's house. Couldn't be what I thought. Cold sweat soaked my back unconsciously. The adjutant was about to leave for the meeting. He was shocked to see me. Is something wrong with the general? He steadied me, his expression strange. There shouldn't be. I'm going to the venue with you. The adjutant hesitated but agreed. Disguised as a soldier, I stood respectfully behind him. The negotiation table was full of generals from various departments, but the main seat was empty. 1 minute before 9, Alex's brother, Adrian, grandly sat in the main seat. Tiffany stood proudly beside him. The whispers below were intense, but no one dared to step forward and criticize Adrian's action. I am deeply saddened by the departure of my brother, Alex. But with his whereabouts unknown for 3 months, legally, he can be declared dead. Everyone here is smart. You should know what to choose. Adrian glanced confidently at the generals below. My hands at my sides wouldn't stop trembling. Alex was dead? Adrian was seizing power? The military cannot go without a commander. I agree to General Adrian becoming our new Major General. The person who spoke wasn't a crony of the second son, but Alex's trusted chief of staff. This betrayal was truly unexpected. One after another, generals voiced their agreement. Only the few on the adjutant's side remained silent. What? Does Adjutant Lin have an opinion about me? Soldiers on standby stepped forward to surround the adjutant. Alex isn't dead. They're lying. I took off my helmet and shouted at the people with ulterior motives below. Ridiculous. Assistant Julian has lost his mind, trying to fool everyone with a counterfeit. Tiffany's voice was mocking. I knew the odds were slim, but I couldn't stand seeing this adulterous couple usurp Alex's legacy. The adjutant anxiously pulled me behind him. Julian, stop talking. Are you betraying Alex too? My voice cracked. I looked at Alex's former confidant in disbelief. Profit outweighs everything. My behavior seemed laughable. Someone, remove the assistant. Just before the soldiers could act, Alex's furious voice roared out. I dare you. The generals were frozen in place. It's just a fake. I have the military seal. Do it now. Tiffany arrogantly pulled out the seal. Adrian also snapped out of his fear. It was fake. They had personally pushed the unconscious Alex into the sea. Hurry up. Arrest this fake too. I looked hopelessly at the bite mark on Alex's neck. It really was a fake. It was Ash. Before the soldiers there could move, the entire conference hall was surrounded by a sudden influx of troops. Cold gun barrels aimed at the arrogant group. The adjutant pushed me down. The change happened fast. The gunshots made my ears ring. Silence returned to the scene, except for a few bodies lying messily in the hall. The generals clamoring for the takeover were dead. Adrian slumped on the ground, begging for forgiveness. Brother, this was all that woman's idea. It has nothing to do with me. Tiffany was the one who truly snapped. She kept muttering, fake. It's a fake. Why aren't you attacking? My eyes were covered by a large, warm hand. A gunshot. The hall went dead silent. Adjutant Lin cleaned this up. My eyes still covered. I was blindly led away from the venue by him. We were back in that familiar office. I broke free from Alex's embrace. My Ash was waiting for me at home. I must have seen it wrong just now. Must be. I kept a calm face and respectfully handed my resignation letter to Alex, who sat in the high seat. General, I am glad to see you return safely. I don't know if you read my previous resignation letter, but I am sincerely requesting to leave. Then I was pinned against the corner of the desk. A low, sexy voice rang in my ear. Julian, why aren't you calling me hubby anymore? My heart sank to the bottom of the ocean. I kinda wanted to bang my head on the pillar next to me. Is this right? Did a conscientious merchant sell me the real thing? I pushed Alex away. My indifferent mask cracked. You mean all those sweet nothings were said to the real deal? Alex dropped to his knees in front of me with sincerity. Wife, I was wrong. Forgive me. I didn't mean to keep it from you. My chest heaved. Even kneeling, Alex's presence was stronger than mine. I backed up, he moved forward. I dared not look into those eager eyes. My back hit the bookshelf. I had nowhere left to retreat. Alex shifted his knee. He pulled out a ring box. Kneeling turned into a proposal. In an instant. Wife, will you marry me? My head was a mess. Couldn't make a sound. Then, possessed by a ghost, I grabbed the ring box, and I ran out in a panic. Behind me, the corners of Alex's mouth turned up. The adjutant walked in to see the general kneeling on the floor, giggling like an idiot. "General, aren't you going to chase him? My wife is shy. I have to give him time to process." The adjutant, fed up with the PDA, running out. I really hoped this was a dream. Even dreams weren't this awkward. I had run off with the ring box and all. I really wanted to slap myself. I had to go argue with that merchant. Why did he sell me the real guy? Before I could sort out my intense emotions, a massive explosion roared from the office building behind me. I tried to run back like a madman, but soldiers suddenly appeared and blocked my path. Struggling violently, I was knocked out and collapsed softly. When I opened my eyes again, all I saw were the stark white walls of a hospital. I ripped out the 4 and tried to run out, but the adjutant blocked me with a grim expression. "How is Alex?" The adjutant held back, not speaking. "How is Alex?" My emotions spiraled out of control. We didn't find the general's remains. The explosives were buried in the general's office. It was confirmed that Miss Vance and the others were colluding with enemy nations. The general's initial marriage and fake death were a plan to catch the internal corruption in one swoop. We didn't expect them to have this backup plan. My legs gave out. I couldn't accept a single word the adjutant said. I regretted my earlier pettiness. Why couldn't I just talk to him properly? "Assistant Julian, you need to take care of your health. You're expecting the general's child." My face was pale. I touched my stomach helplessly. There was a beating life inside. I kept brainwashing myself. There's still the baby. I have to give birth to the baby safely. Alex would be so happy to see it later. The adjutant said they needed the appointment letter to appease the other generals in the army. The letter appointing Alex as Major General? I don't know where it is. That must have been what Tiffany was looking for, but I really didn't know. "Julian, think carefully. Anything the general gave you." Alex gave me nothing. Only that photo. The one he threw away and I picked back up. Trembling, I took the photo out from the lining of my clothes. Opening the frame, the lightweight appointment letter was sealed inside. So many things became clear, but there was no chance to repay him. I calmly instructed the adjutant to search carefully for Alex's whereabouts. I calmly announced to the public that Alex and I were on our honeymoon. I calmly imitated Alex's handwriting to sign important documents with the adjutant. The adjutant looked worriedly at my increasingly pale face. He was afraid I would collapse from depression. I smiled faintly to comfort him. "I won't. I still have to wait for Alex to come back. 56 days, 11 hours, 24 minutes, 24 seconds. That was how long I had been without news of Alex. I stroked the restless baby in my belly. "Baby, wait a bit longer to come out. Daddy definitely wants to be the first to see you." Breaking news. Tiffany Vance and General Adrian have been executed by Major General Alex Sterling for secret collusion with enemy states. Major General Alex Sterling's marriage was merely part of a strategic plan. Currently, the Major General is on his honeymoon on Nova Prime with his true spouse. Please stay tuned for further reports. I switched off the TV decisively and began my daily prayer routine. It was just praying for Alex to be safe. I knew it was just psychological comfort, but I did it every day. The small apartment I used to rent had been secretly bought by Alex. He had also bought the adjacent unit and knocked down the wall to connect them. The lawyer calmly transferred Alex's assets to me. His confidence dutifully guarded my safety. It seemed Alex knew he might not come back. I really couldn't do anything about such a domineering man. My belly grew rounder day by day, but my heart sank lower and lower. I reduced my outings. I lay listlessly on the sofa, neurotically refreshing the latest reports. The adjutant sent out wave after wave of search parties. They sent back no news. Sometimes no news is the best news. I didn't know how I would face a partial corpse. Fortunately, the movement in my belly would pull me out of those terrifying thoughts. My dreams now were full of Alex from our school days. Smiling, sweating, cold-faced. Alex was the school legend. Good background, good personality, good grades. Everyone liked him. I was a speck of dust looking up at the moon. After being illuminated by the moon a few times, I became obsessed with that warmth. A casual rescue from him, and I became his unnoticed follower. from my green youth all the way to the workplace. But every time I woke up, the space beside me was cold. I got up calmly and got dressed. The doctor said light exercise was needed in the late stages of pregnancy. I would take a lap outside in the early morning when there weren't many people. Walking, I found myself inexplicably back at the entrance of that underground market. I shook my head helplessly and turned to leave, but the guy in the hoodie blocked my path again. Honored guest, I have another Alex Sterling bot. Do you still need to buy? For the sake of being a repeat customer, I'll sell it to you for 20 this time. Suppressing the throbbing in my heart, my voice trembled slightly. Is it real? Guaranteed. Where would I even get a fake? Suppressing my emotions, I followed him through the winding turns with a calm face. A few months felt as long as a lifetime. I stood in front of that dilapidated door once again. This time, the door opened from the inside. Sunlight shone on Alex's handsome face. I threw off the hustler's supporting hand, waddled up, with my belly, and punched that handsome face. When I tried to swing my fist again, my tears fell uncooperatively. The hustler looked panicky at Alex's injury. You okay? Alex wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth casually. I'm fine. My wife knows a little boxing. I fell into a warm embrace. Alex kissed my hair lovingly. Baby, don't cry. I'm back. I looked up and bit his lip in venting anger. You knew to come back. Who cares if you're back? The feeling of love rushed in fast. We kissed passionately in the open courtyard. The hesitant voice of the hustler rang out from the side. Friend, you haven't paid yet. I shyly pushed Alex away and handed 100 credits to the boss. Keep the change. As soon as I finished speaking, Alex scooped me up securely, and we headed toward home.